right, welcome to the first week of our lectures about the Diamond Sutra. We're working with Daehaeng Sunim's Korean to English translation of the Diamond Sutra. And this is the book. I'll go ahead and read the text we're covering, and it should show up on the screen as well. But this is we're doing a 7-week course in the spring, and after, we'll take a break for Buddha's birthday, and we may have a break for the summer or not. I don't know. We'll have to see how everybody feels. But afterwards, we'll pick up again in the fall, at least 2. There's 32 chapters in the Diamond Sutra, and if we tried to cover every single interesting point about it, it would take a lot longer than 32 weeks. So some weeks I'll cover 2 or 3 chapters if they're fairly short, and other weeks, if it's a very long chapter, I'll just pick out 1 or 2 main points from that chapter, and that's all we'll do for the week. Okay, I'd like to start on page 29, and the English title is Sharing the Energy of the Whole. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. I will start on page 23, I think. Yes, on page 23. And this is a poem that Daehaeng Sunim wrote about the Diamond Sutra after she finished translating it. Okay. The heavens and the earth and human beings, every kind of thing in the universe is unfolding every instant, constantly gathering together and separating. All across this vast land, the rivers and the mountains, the flowers and the trees, all follow this rhythm, spreading this cadence far and wide. Singing along with this, a quiet laugh arises from within me and from within every great peak of the universe. Take this path and everything is working together as one. Take that path and everything still works together as one. Every life and thing in the world just keeps unfolding together, on and on, endlessly. The laughter of my one mind reverberates throughout all the realms of the universe, causing every drop of water to give off a sweet fragrance, and every blossom to transform into fruit, ripening everything, throughout all the unseen dimensions, as well as all the visible realms, so that every being sings this song of endless unfolding, each according to its role. If you take this path, everything works together as one. If you take that path, everything still works together as one. But if you can awaken to this great unfolding for yourself, where everything in the universe is functioning as one through one mind, each connected to the other, realizing that all this is happening here together with your foundation, your fundamental mind, then forevermore you will be free, free, truly free. This is a really deep poem. And this, in a lot of ways, this sums up the main points that Daehaeng Sunim wants to make in the Diamond Sutra. The basic point that consistently flows throughout the Diamond Sutra is that everything is working together as one. There's nothing that's separate from this. There's no part that's separate from this. There's no knowledge that's separate from this. It's all one flowing whole. And when Daehaeng Sunim translated this, she didn't translate it from the perspective of reading the text and then trying to understand what it said. She translated it from the perspective of already understanding what the text was talking about and then expressing it in what we have in modern Korean. So this is, by the way, a translation from her modern Korean into English. And I think we did a really good job translating it, but the Korean is really deep, and it feels like it functions on multiple dimensions, so that every time you read it, it changes something inside you. Even though you don't recognize what it's doing to you, something's different. The next time you look at it, your perspective's a little different. It's extremely profound. It's quite amazing, and frankly, as a translator, it's a little bit annoying because there's no finish. Where's the end? Okay, now we're done, and it just doesn't show up. Okay, one of the funny things about this is that Let's see. Where am I? Okay. So one of the things about this is that, if you take this path, everything works together as one. If you take that path, everything works together as one. No matter what people are doing, the entire world and universe is still working together as one whole. But the problem is, if they're behaving wisely, this generates wise results. If they're behaving badly, it generates bad results for them. But it's still working together as one whole. In a lot of ways, it's like a computer. The old expression, garbage in, garbage out. What you input gets processed accordingly, and you get the result of that. And, the results can be really unpleasant. Whereas, so at the end of this, Sunim says, if you realize that everything is working as one, through your foundation, through what she often calls one mind, and you realize that everything's working through here, everything's connected through here, and then you put that into practice, you start applying that, then she says you'll be free forevermore. You'll be free from the habits, you'll be free from the automatic karmic-based responses where you just reflexively react to something, where your habits and your unconscious ways of looking at things push you into certain directions. And maybe those directions are good, maybe they're bad, but the problem is you're not in control. You're being taken for a ride according to what you've done in the past, according to how you've used your mind, according to how you've used your body. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can change that. We created that stuff through our inputs. And through new inputs, we can dissolve that. We can move forward. We can find a better way of living. And a lot of that just starts with the desire to find a better way to live, find a better way to do things. And just saying, I don't want to do this anymore. It's kind of the moment of clarity that the addiction programs talk about. You don't have to know how to do it. You just have to know you don't want to do it anymore. I want to find a new way to do things. And just ask that and let that sink down inside. And when you do that, that intention, that desire, makes a connection with this energy of the whole. Everything is contained there. All the wisdom, all the energy, everything is there. So when it makes that connection, then it move in tune with that. Then you get a response on that level. And it may not be the complete detailed plan on how to go forward, but it'll be the next step. It'll be one more step forward. And so you take that one step forward and you entrust that back again. And then the next step shows up, and then the next step, and then the next step. And pretty soon you've gone a long way. You're a long ways from where you started. And so you don't have to know the whole detailed layout. I don't have to know the route from here to Busan. It's always I'm the sort of person who always wants to know that stuff. What's all, every road, every junction, every rest stop. But I don't have to know that way. All I have to know is turn left at the front gate, right? If I start with that, I'm going in the right direction. Okay. So one of the things about this too, that as one aspect of this, as Sunim talks about this as everything is working together as one flowing whole, and you'll see this throughout the text. You can't say ultimately that there is a thing being taught. At a superficial level, you can say, well, I learned this, I'm reading this, and that's true. But at a very deep level, you can't say there's such a thing there, because there's no separate thing to say that you were taught. On one level, it looks like this jukbi exists as a separate thing. But if I could see at the atomic level, maybe I would just see a blur of odd atoms moving around, or just a blur of energy with no distinction between this or that. Or I would see that they were, it was completely connected to everything else. To my eyes, in the visible realm, it looks separate. But if I saw it at a deeper level, I might realize that it's completely not separate. It's one interchanging whole. And so we see this throughout the Diamond Sutra, where it emphasizes that there's no I that's doing things. There's no separate me that's doing things. And likewise, there's no separate being that receives that. And this is the truth from the perspective of an awakened person. You know, from one level of reality, I can say there's me and there's other people, and how I treat you affects you as well as me. There's you and me, but at the very fundamental level, there's not even you and me. And this brings up one of the points about the Diamond Sutra, is it's often, in my opinion, misunderstood as a person, the Buddha, teaching an uneducated or unexperienced person, Subhuti. Subhuti was one of the Buddha's great disciples, by the way. And so you have this awakened person talking to an unawakened person in most translations. But that's actually not the case. From the context in here, it becomes clear that Subhuti has a very high level of understanding. He has a moment of awakening in the middle of the Diamond Sutra, but he's already functioning at a very deep, what we would call an awakened level already. And so when the Buddha talks about there's no doer, there's no me, he doesn't have to explain to Subhuti that, oh yes, there is something, you do have to make an effort. You do have to practice and study and work to learn stuff. You have to work to apply what you experience. You have to make an effort to apply it to your life. Subhuti already understands this. Subhuti's already there, and he's already done that. And so, the Buddha's at the point where and as you do that, you need to be careful not to get caught up in subtle ideas of I'm doing, I did. We'll see this in chapter 3 and 4, I think, but where the Buddha talks about if you have a sense of, if you translate it one way, it's if you think of yourself as a person, if you think of somebody else as an unenlightened being, if you think of I did. But at this level, it's not that quite expressed that way. I think it's a much more subtle, I'm saving other people. These people need my help. And so even though somebody like Subhuti has a very deep level of awareness, there's still a subtle thought. There's people that need to be helped. And there is help that needs to be given, but there's still this fixed dichotomy. There's still this fixed little bit trace of this division. There's me and there's other people. And so even in the Buddha saying, even as you see them, even as you reach out to help them, keep working on letting go of that division, that they're a separate person, they're a separate being. He talks about this numerous times, that you can't truly fulfill your role as an aspect of this whole if you're seeing people as separate. Because if I see you as separate from myself, then there's a limitation there. It gets really easy to say, my thoughts don't affect you. It sounds like a little bit like a hippie, but my energy doesn't affect you because there's me and there's you over there. But if I realize that you and I are aspects of the same thing, your life isn't different from my life. Your pain is my pain. Your happiness is my happiness. Your body is my body. We work together as one, sharing everything. When I really understand this, when I pick up on this unseen aspect of our connection, then it completely changes how I behave. There's no such thing as mine versus yours when you get to that level, because there just isn't. You know, if I have money, or if I have something and I see you need it, I just give it to you because it's like I need it. Right? There's no thought of, well, if I give it to her, then I don't have it. It's, you know, there's need and I'm taking care of the need, and she's happy or she's relieved or she's in a better place, and that's my heart. That's my life too at the same time. So I feel happier, I feel in a better place. And so lots of people, I think everybody, I hope everybody at some point has this kind of moment of selflessness where you care about the other person to such an extent that you don't even think of yourself. This is deeply transformative, but it's also the way the world really works. And it's why, I don't know if this is the right expression, but you can almost say that empathy is the king of emotions, or empathy is the true mark of a growing human being, because you begin to pick up, you have some sense of this deeper truth that we're all connected. I can't completely ignore other people's suffering. We all exist connected together. Okay, looking at page 29, Daehaeng Sunim wrote, in Korean it uses the word preface, but that book section, that book title, the section title works in Korean just fine, but in English it has a little bit different usage, so we deleted it from the English, and we just gave it the title, Sharing the Energy of the Whole. Now I'll go ahead and read it now. Through the vast, bright wisdom of inherent nature, the Buddha Shakyamuni entered the great flowing and connecting energy of one mind, where he became one with the heavens and the earth and human beings. Having taken form in the human realm, when it was time for the midday meal, that is to say, when it was time to gather and share energy with all beings, the world-honored one put on clothes that were not clothes, and took up his bowl, the bowl of mind, where a single thought entrusted to this foundation transforms and manifests into the world, becoming reality. Holding this bowl, he entered the bright energy of true inherent nature, without any aspect of coming or going. With the intent of sharing this energy of the whole with all beings, he calmly gathered this bright energy of inherent nature, gathering it with no moment of gathering. He returned to the place that is not two places, and there, one with everything, shared the energy of the whole. Having finished, he took off the robe that was not a robe, put away the bowl that was not a bowl, and making the feet of all beings his own feet, he seated himself in the great emptiness, the interconnected flowing that encompasses everything, and is the underlying functioning of all the universe. This is a really deep statement, a really interesting piece, and I realized that what it is it's the parallel for chapter 1. Chapter 1 has the Buddha was at a certain place with his disciples, and he went to town to get food for the meal, and then he came back. Well, this is the unseen aspect. This is what was happening at the unseen levels, at the, you could call it the higher spiritual dimensions. So on chapter 1, we see what the Buddha's body was doing, in the traditional version especially. We see what the Buddha's body was doing. Here, we see what, in Korean, his mind was doing, or his spiritual dimension was doing. So it's quite an interesting, piece. Okay. So, let me go ahead and look at chapter 1. We have a few more minutes here. And after we finish the English part of this talk here, then we'll have a Korean discussion about these contents. And I think for YouTube and for the video will probably stop after the English part. just because there's lots of people who don't necessarily understand Korean. Okay, chapter 1, page 35. All things in the universe arise from and return to, function and manifest through this non-dual one mind. Thus I have perceived. As the Buddha was building Shravasti, he taught that one mind is the source of everything, and that all things and energies function as one through one mind. Gathered here together with him were 1,250 great bhikkhus. When it was time for meals, the Buddha would put on robes, take up his bowl, and go into the city with the other bhikkhus, going from house to house collecting food offerings. Returning, he would eat his meal, put away his robe and bowl, wash his feet, and arrange himself on his seat. Okay, you may have noticed a few really unusual pieces about chapter 1. Normally, in every version of the sutras, the very first line is the words, "Thus I have perceived." But in Daehaeng Kunsim's version, it opens with, "All things in the universe arise from and return to, function and manifest through this non-dual one mind. Thus I have perceived." On the one hand, that is, I think you can say, that is a very true statement for a deeply awakened person. This is what they've perceived. On the other, I think this might also be the translation of the deep meaning of the title of the Diamond Sutra. Because if you look at a normal Chinese character text of the Diamond Sutra, it starts with the title, in the Sanskrit is Vraja Chaka Prajnaparamita Sutra. And then, "Thus I have perceived." Well, I wonder, I don't know, it's a little too late for me to ask, but I wonder if the actual title of the Diamond Sutra is this text. This is the meaning of the title. All things in the universe arise from and return to, function and manifest through this non-dual one mind. The normal translation of the Sanskrit is the diamond cutter of illusion, but I think it might be this. Like I said, that's just my supposition. But it's an interesting point. And the truth of the statement is probably the most important thing. And it comes back to this idea that nothing is separate from this non-dual whole. There's nothing, everything we experience, everything we see is this non-dual whole manifesting. And because it's non-dual, there's no divisions. There's no chunk you can carve out and say, this is always like this. It's, the old analogy is it's water flowing flowing through the stream. You can't separate out the pieces. You can't separate out the chunks because they don't exist. It's all interconnected. The second paragraph starts with a really interesting phrase. As the Buddha was building Shravasti, right? Well, if you're familiar with the traditional translation, it's not the Buddha was building Shravasti, it's much more simple. When the Buddha was residing at Shravasti, basically when the Buddha was in Shravasti, he was with these great bhikkhus, and then this teaching happened. But Daehaeng's Hanga is extremely explicit. It's very simple. There's no ambiguity here. As the Buddha was building Shravasti, or when the Buddha was building Shravasti. Well, what does she mean? Because Shravasti was already an old city by the time of this teaching. Well, she's talking about the spiritual foundation of Shravasti. There's a place or a building or an organization or a family doesn't exist by just the physical building or the physical structure. It's this spiritual connection. It's this spiritual connection to the whole. This is what gives something strength. This is what gives something energy. And whether it's a city or an office or a building or a country, this is where its strength comes from. You know, we have, I gave the example here last time maybe, but we have a express train terminal about 7 minutes from here. And it was originally designed as the end of the Busan to Seoul express train system. But as they were finishing it up, the people in Seoul complained that it stopped just short of Seoul and everybody would have to transfer to the subway or whatever. And so people were quite irate about that and demanded that it continue into the center of Seoul, into the main train station there. And so they did it that way. But as a result, we have this massive train station about 15 minutes by train short of Seoul city center. And after that was built and when the express line first opened, this train terminal was very empty. It's got a lot of places in it for businesses and restaurants and what do you call it, like 7-Eleven or Dunkin' Donuts or coffee places, but it was almost empty. Most of the trains were skipping this train station. They were either, the next train station is Taejeon, and so there weren't many trains stopping here, and so the businesses were having a hard time. There were lots of empty storefronts there, and it looked like for a while like they were going to close the train station and just route the line straight to Seoul and to the next stop down. Well, at that time, Daehaeng would tell her attendant, "Oh, I want to go for a walk." So they'd get in the, let's go over to the train station. They'd get in the car and they'd go to the train station, and sometimes she'd just walk in circles around the inside of the train station. And if she was feeling particularly bad, she would just have her attendant drive around the outside of the train station, which is like, frankly, it's a boring drive and a really boring walk. When you walked inside the train station, it smelled dusty. You can say, well, you're out of the weather, but in the spring or the summer or the nice weather, you're inside and it's cold and it's echoey and it's dusty. And so it wasn't really it was a strange walk. Well, after a while, the train station started becoming a lot more vibrant. This area surrounding the train station became much more built up. They started building apartments around here. And so the traffic there naturally increased. And it also made it very easy for our branches around Korea to connect to the center here because we're so close to the train station. And I think Sunim was doing something similar, where having an awakened person be present in a place, having them raise the intention repeatedly, this place should be successful. This place should be a center where everybody can learn. This place should be some place that helps people brighten their minds. That energy doesn't just disappear. There's temples around Korea. I know one place down by the old capital of Gyeongju, and all there is right now is 2 pagodas. They call them the East Pagoda and the West Pagoda. And they were probably built about 1,300 years ago, maybe 1,400 years ago. And nobody even knows what their original names were. Those kinds of pagodas always are given names, but the names have been lost. The temple name is known. It's Saji. It's not too far. It's on the backside of what they call the famous Sokaram Buddha statue near the ocean. But I was really shocked when I first went there a long time ago, because you could feel the energy. You could feel just the bright energy of like somebody really sincere had been living, a lot of very sincere, diligent people had been practicing selflessly there, and that the echo of that energy was still there. You know, it's been 1,000 years probably since that temple was destroyed, but the energy of that was still there. So the positive intentions that we give rise to, when we give rise to those and we entrust them inwardly and let them sink down within us, those positive intentions that connect to the whole don't just disappear. They just keep rolling underneath, unseen, but they still keep going and going and going and affecting everything. So on the one hand, depending on the circumstances, we need to give material aid. We need to give money, food, a helping hand when the circumstances are necessary. But we can't neglect this unseen spiritual aid as well. Because in a lot of ways, this unseen spiritual aid is actually more important. You know, if you feed somebody, as the old saying, you feed them for a meal or a day. But this unseen spiritual aid is what really can help us turn our lives around. It can really help us see things differently and inspire us or motivate us or give us what we need to go forward at a different level, to go forward at a different, in just a qualitatively different way. Because when your perspective changes, your behavior and everything else changes naturally. You know, when you get that, there's no need to beat yourself up. It's like, oh, well, I didn't know before, but now I do. Okay, if I'd known before, I would have behaved better, or I would have done things differently. But I know now, so now is the moment that exists. And so this is where I can go forward. And again, you don't have to know the entire way forward. You just need to know the next step. When you understand what the next step should be, then it's really important to take it. If you just say, oh, I know what it is, and then don't put it into practice, you'll forget about it. So you need to take that next step. You need to apply that bit of understanding, and then pay attention and see what results. When something results, when some understanding or some experience happens, reflect on that, but then also let that go again. Don't let that become your ceiling. Don't let that experience become the thing that keeps you from moving forward. So even if it's a wonderful thing, with gratitude, entrust that back and go forward. Then that will also change and refine itself again and come out again as a new experience. But you have to let go of it in order for it to change, in order for it to grow. Okay, I'll go ahead and stop here for today, and we'll pick this up next week and keep going with this. So thank you very much for coming today.